Hi friends, in the previous video we have covered how exactly to use if conditional and control statements. In this video, the most important concept called optionals. Okay, without a optional questions in interview, we will not see any interview. Let's see. Let me create a variable. Let a value is of type integer equal to 10. Let b value is of type integer equal to 20. Let c value or else result equal to a value plus b value. I'm taking the result, and finally I'm taking these are constants. I'm making them as variables. My work is done. I performed addition and I have printed the result, and I want to clear the values. Value equal to nil. Nil means nothing. B value equal to nil. C value result equal to nil. Perfect. Run it. Nil cannot be assigned to type int. My work is done, but I'm trying to put nothing. I just want to clear the values, but it is not allowing because it is int. Int can only store integers. Int cannot store strings. Okay, int cannot store nils. Okay, only integers can be stored. Okay, to make this variable to store nil as well, we need to use optional. Int question mark means now int can store integer value or nil. Here also optional. If you want, we can declare an optional. Here also integer optional. Now what we need to understand, optional is a variable. I'm just trying to put something here. Optional is a variable which can be hold either value or nil. Ignore this statement. Okay, variable perform addition here. That will be printed, no problem. 30 is printed, which is optional again, or else you can remove this. This is not optional, right? If you want to make it optional. Simple. Optional is a variable which is capable of holding a value or nil. Okay, which is capable of holding a value or nil. How to declare an optional? Optional can be declared in multiple ways. Two ways actually. This is one of the ways. When do we use optional? When you are not sure whether the variable contains a value or not. In simple, this is actually not right example. Let me put one more example. Let name of the person, which is string, equal to DN. Where nickname, I may or may not be having nickname, so I'm declaring it as nothing, not nothing. String of type optional. What it conveys to the compiler is compiler nickname is an optional. It may or may not contain a value. It is not mandatory to have everybody to have nickname, right? So I declared nickname is optional. Now print and see what it is. Name. Nickname is nil, means by default it is holding nothing. At present I do not have anything. In future I may or may not be having also. In future I have some nickname, let's say DN. It is perfectly fine. This is the real case of using optional. Optional is a variable which is capable of holding a value or nothing, which is called nil. When do you use optional? Whenever you are not sure that whether the variable contains a may or may not contain a value. Whenever you are not sure whether a variable may or may not contain a value, then you can go for an optional. This is one of the ways. And one more way is initial. If you see in India, North Indians, some of the North Indians, they do not have any initial. They simply contains a first name only. Okay, here initial is also optional. I have initial, so I'm putting here. Okay, if you do if somebody does not have any optional any initial, they simply ignore that. Okay, here there is another way of declaring, which is exclamation. This is also a way of declaring optional. This is called implicit. Implicit unwrapped optional. This is optional. The difference I'll show you here. Okay, this is optional, right? This is also optional. Optional, one of the another definition is optional is a magical box. You can say magical box which may or may not may or may not contain a value. Okay, what we need to do here, we are trying to perform addition between two optionals, but it was giving error because this is magical box. It may or may not contain a value. To perform the addition, I need integers only. Value of type int question mark must be unwrapped, must be opened to a value of type int, so that I can perform the operation. What it say? This is optional. Optional means magical box. Magical box in the within the magical box, inside the magical box, there might be a value or not. So while performing the operation, compiler is asking, I do not want any magical boxes. I want integer values. Open the magical box and give me the integer value. Here we are opening by putting exclamation. This is called force unwrapping. Forcefully, we are telling to the compiler, you go ahead, there is a value inside. So the error is gone, just try it. Optional 30 is printed. Optional 30 is printed. Assume that it has no value and we are trying to perform the operation. It gives you the crash because optional has nothing. You are trying to forcefully telling to the compiler, it has a value, go ahead and perform the operation. It went ahead and performed the operation. It found unexpectedly found nil while unwrapping an optional. Unexpectedly found nil while unwrapping the option. This is a error which we need to understand. This error comes only when it tried to perform the operation, but it found nil. Okay, this is called force unwrapping optionals. Here, one more way we can declare, that is like which I told, right? This way also we can declare, which is implicit unwrapped optional. What does it mean? When you declare implicit unwrapped optional, you don't have to force here. Here, implicit. What it says to the compiler? Compiler at present, I don't have a value, but I will have a value be before performing the operation. Forcefully, it is basically implicitly unwrapped. Already here this is unwrapping, right? Force unwrapping. We are doing the unwrapping here itself, but it means that compiler, I do not have a value at present, but before performing the operation, I'll definitely contain a value. Okay, you don't have to worry. You don't have to force unwrap anything. Since we are already telling to the compiler, I do not have a value, but definitely I'm going to have a value. We already told here. So here, you don't need to open it again. Okay, see here, same thing, 20. 30 is printed. If it has no value, we are trying to force here. Not force, by default, we told here. You go ahead and perform the operation. It gets a crash. Okay. In future, like I have declared at line number 5, I have declared implicit unwrapped optional, and at in future in the line number 10. Line number 10, I have declared b value equal to 50. In this case, there is no crash because we told the same In future, I'm going to have a value. After some time, I had a value here. I have a value 50, and it went ahead and performed the operation. There is no issue. But this is also not recommended. Because here we are telling to the compiler, I am definitely going to have a value, but assume that you forget to assign the value, it gives you a crash. Okay, even force unwrapping is also not recommended. Assume that here we have an optional. At present, I have nothing here. In future, I have a value. I'm putting 10 here. If you put 10, there is no issue. If you do not put 10, there is an issue. You're forcefully telling, right? It is nil. At present, I have no value, but it may or may not contain. This means it may or may not contain a value. This means it will be containing a value. It will means future. In some point of time, it contain a value. I'm going to assign a value. Okay. Here there is no value assigned for a value. Then it gives you a crash because we are forcefully doing. This is not recommended. Forcefully is not recommended. Force unwrapping is not recommended. Okay, 3 things here. Options can be declared in 2 different ways. One is by using question mark, another one is by using exclamation. When you use question mark, it may or may not contain a value. When you use implicit unwrapped optional, it will be containing a value. These 2 are optionals only. But before performing the operation, we need to unwrap the magical box, unwrap the optional. Optional can be unwrapped in one of the ways is force unwrapping. There are other ways as well. Let me show you. Force unwrapping. What are the optional unwrapping techniques? In interviews, they will 100% ask you. First is way of declaring optionals. Second thing, fourth thing, third thing, force unwrapping. Fourth thing, optional binding. Fifth thing, guardlet. Sixth thing, nil coalescing operator. Okay. We have used one of the techniques, which is force unwrapping here. We have declaring options we have seen, implicit unwrapped optional we have seen, force unwrapping we have seen. We see the rest of the 3. Here, what is the issue here? We are at present we do not have a value. In future, I may or may not have a value. Here in future, I definitely contain a value. That is what we have specified here. Assume that I want to perform operation here. Before performing the operation, I want to check whether it has a value or not. If it has a value, then only perform operation. One of the ways is if let temp a equal to a value should be having a value. Let temp b equal to b value. If these 2 are having a value, then only perform the operation and print. Clear, right? What we are doing here, this is called optional binding. Binding means linking. We are linking the actual value to the temporary value. We are assigning actual value to a temporary value, actual value to the temporary value, and inside this block, we need to use those temporary values so that you can remove the exclamation. Clear? What we are doing here, this is as we are not changing, let me make it let. Okay, what we are trying to do, we are checking if a has a value, copy that to the temporary value. If b has a value, copy that to the temporary variable. And if those 2 are having a value, then there is no issue. Directly go inside and perform the operation. Okay. Putting nil, no problem. You can also ignore because we are checking for integers, right? So we don't need to have the optional here. Since we're sure that these 2 are integers only, because we have put one condition here, take integer from out from a value, take integer out from b value. Those two are kept in temporary variables and performing the addition and printing it. Run till here. Nothing is printed because a has no value. A has no value, so nothing is printed. Only DNREDdi is printed and a nickname is printed. Previously, when we use force unwrapping, there was a crash. Right? If a has no value, if you are not using optional binding, there was a crash. A value, B value, force unwrapping. When you use force unwrapping, there was a crash. Now, since we are using optional binding, okay, there is no crash. Safely, we are handling the optionals. Here, temporary A, we are not using force unwrapping anywhere. This is called optional binding. If condition, if this is called if-let, generally people call it as if-let. Actual concept is terminology is optional binding. Clear? One more statement is godlet. Godlet temp A, comma, temp A equal to A value, comma, temp B equal to B value. Else we use exit. At present I'm using exit. We can use return. Generally we use return from the return, etc. But most of the time we use return only. Here what it says, same values. Same thing here. We are using right. Same thing we are using. Whatever we are using, same thing we are using, but it has else block. It has else block. If there is no value, stop the operation. Print found invalid inputs. Else I can go ahead and perform operation. Print some is the temporary variables we have here plus temp B. Okay, I'll re-explain them. First, see the output. Found invalid inputs. This is printed. Assume that I'm putting proper value in optional. $60, which is 60 printed here, and sum is 60 is printed here. Okay, if the optionals are having proper values, then no, there is no issue. If optionals are having improper values, we are safely handling. Previously it used to crash, right? Now there is no crash because we are safely handling the optionals. These are the ways. And one more way is nil coalescing operator, double question mark. In operators we have seen double question mark, like I said we'll be seeing it in future. Let me show you that. Result, we have result here. Let result equal to A value plus B value. Here these two are optionals only, right? We need to use force unwrapping. Actually, instead of using force unwrapping, we can use nil coalescing operator. For this also 0. Basically we are providing some default value. If B value is optional and B value has no value, B value is having nil, then take the default value which is 0. Here also take the default value which is 0. Instead of crashing, okay, we can use this also. You can give default value. Where is the result? Result is not printed. Okay. A value plus B value. It is. Why is this not printing? Okay, these two are having proper values, right? So 60 is printed. Here also 60 is printed. If these two are not having proper values, assume that there are no values assigned, or else I perform the operation here. I'm setting a value equal to nil because it is an optional. I can set nil. B value is also nil. Or let me put only for a value, which is 50 printed, which is 50. A value is considered as 0. Basically, we are giving some default value if optional does not contain a value. This is called nil Coalescing operator. And in interviews, they will ask you what is the difference between if let and God let. The difference here is the temporary variables are only accessible within the block in case of if let. In the God let, the temporary variables are not accessible in the else block and accessible in the rest of the program. In this case, rest of the file. Assume that if it is in function, we have seen, I guess it is accessible within the function where the God statement is declared, defined in that particular block. You can access this. In the temporary variables, you cannot access here. Here, let me temp A, which is not showing here because only outside of this block, rest of the function, you can access the God statement temporary variables. This is all about optionals. Okay, I'm just repeating. What is an optional? Optional is a variable which is capable of holding a value or nil. When do we use optionals? Whenever you are not sure a variable contains a value, may or may not contain a value, then you can go for optional. One of the examples is this nickname everybody may not contain. Okay, options can be declared in two different ways. One is by using question mark, another one is by using exclamation. The difference between using derivative question mark means it may or may not contain a value. The integer question mark, when you use exclamation, it says to the compiler that it is definitely going to have a value in future, but at present I do not have a value. What are the different optional unwrapping techniques? There are four different optional unwrapping techniques. One is force unwrapping, implicitly optional binding, guard statement, and nil coalescing operator. You can also consider this as also optional unwrapping techniques. That is implicit unwrap. What is force unwrapping? Force unwrapping is specifying exclamation and telling to the compiler that it is having a value. It is definitely having a value. Go ahead and perform the operation. And optional binding, which is if let. Please rejoin the session. Okay, if it is gets over. If let we are binding the optional value into the temporary variable and using that in the block.